But I want to thank everybody for joining this session to learn about what changes have occurred in our gambling and gaming laws for Virginia from the 2022 session. And we have 3 different presenters from 3 different agencies from the state. Kelly G is with the lottery. Major Richard Boyd is with the Virginia State Police. And Michael Menifee is with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. As I said earlier in the chat, I did place the agenda with a bio on each of the presenters so that you have that for your pleasure. But if we want to go ahead and just get started, you don't want to hear from me. Everybody's heard from me enough before. And I'm going to turn this over to Kelly G with the lottery, who can tell you a little bit about what's happened and what's maybe in the future based upon the laws that have changed.
Thank you, Anne. You do so much for this group of people, and I just really commend you for taking the time to get these people together. My dad was the manager of a CSB for, I don't know, he just retired from state service like 3 years ago. So he worked in Petersburg at the Chesterfield Petersburg CSB as a substance abuse counselor. So I got a lot of love for this group. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Okay. So I am the executive director of the Virginia Lottery. Virginia Lottery oversees, obviously we run a business, we sell lottery products. And separately, and most recently, we have regulatory responsibilities for sports betting and casinos. That means we regulate, which is a fancy word for license, audit, do compliance for third-party operators of sports betting, mobile platforms, and the casinos. I'm actually in Danville. Danville just did their groundbreaking for their casino. Felt like a pep rally. People down here are very excited about what Caesars is going to hopefully bring to the area. And so I'm in the Institute of Research and Advanced Learning here in Danville. It's very nice. 3 things that kind of big things that happened this session related to what's in our purview. Sports betting. So right now we got about 14 mobile platforms where people can go on and place a bet. Operators are taxed on what's called their adjusted gross revenue. So that's all the wagers minus what they gave back as winnings to players. And then they're allowed to deduct a few other things from their taxable revenue, like federal excise tax, but really namely is up until recently, they have been allowed to deduct what they give out in free bets and bonuses. So you guys will probably see signs that say, at DraftKings, first $150 in bets free. That's a promotion. And they were able to deduct that $150 from their taxable revenue. And that was kind of generally allowed at the beginning, mostly as a way to kind of get these mobile platforms up and running, really convert people from the black market to the regulated market. But the General Assembly this year in their budget said, yeah, we're going to stop that. And so beginning July 1, if a permit holder has been in existence or once they hit their 12 months of operations, that deductibility of promos, free bets, bonuses goes away. And I think the legislature had 2 goals with that. One is to hopefully limit some of this advertising that has been particularly strong the last year as they came online. So if they're not giving out as many free bets, you're not going to see as many advertisements for free bets. And then second, we're hoping that it kind of benefits the state's bottom line. Less things that they're deducting from taxable revenue hopefully means more money to the state. So that was in budget language. Next up is the casinos. So you guys will remember a law originally said 5 casinos in Virginia: Bristol, Danville, Portsmouth, Norfolk, and Richmond. To have a casino, the locality had to vote in a referendum to allow it. All of the other localities allowed it. It had successful referendums except for Richmond. And so this session, there was kind of a new push to maybe say, Richmond voters said no, they don't get to try again. Let's move it to Petersburg, led by Senator Joe Morrissey and Delegate Kim Taylor. And so there was language in the budget this year that said, let's put Richmond on hold. The voters said no, they don't get to try again. And in the meantime, let's study the economic feasibility of a casino in Petersburg, which all the other localities had to go through before it got to referenda. So in 2019, JLARC, Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, which is kind of like the state's nonpartisan research wing, did an economic feasibility study on the other casinos so that voters knew the potential benefits to the locality and potential benefits to the state. They're going to do that for Petersburg this summer. And then Richmond is already indicated they're looking to try again for a referendum next year. So kind of volatile about what's going on with the Central Virginia casino. And the last really big thing on our plate is JLARC, that research group that I just mentioned. They were tasked with a study this year to assess the advantages and disadvantages of consolidating gaming regulatory oversight. So right now we have 3 agencies, right? We've got the lottery that has lottery, casino, sports betting. We've got Charitable Gaming. Mr. Menifee is going to be on a little bit later. He has charitable gaming and fantasy sports. And then we have the Racing Commission, which has live horse racing and the Rosies, those historical horse racing machines. For 3 separate agencies, we're independent, but the other 2 are under the Secretary of Ag. It's just, we're a little disjointed. So JLARC is studying, you know, are there duplicative efforts? Could enforcement be better if you're under one agency? You know, does everybody have different missions? Can you really kind of come together under one house if you're all kind of, you know, benefiting different entities? The report is going to come out in October. That report is also going to include the economic feasibility study of Petersburg, which is going to inform the General Assembly for the 2023 session. So that study, I think, will lead to potential legislation in 23 related to casinos and whether or not there's an interest from legislators to consolidate. So I would say those are probably our 3 biggest and only items from this session.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. G at this time, or maybe they're percolating and if you have some and you can either unmute or you can type them in the Q&A or the chat is fine. Otherwise, what we could do is just go ahead and move on to Major Boyd, which his camera, he does not have a camera on his laptop, or it's not working properly at the moment. So you'll see his name, but not his face. And feel free, if you have any questions for him after he is done, to go ahead and ask them or type them in the chat or the Q&A. Or if questions come up for Kelly, please do the same. And we'll just keep moving on, and we'll have time for questions also at the end. Major Boyd.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate everything. Thank you for setting this up, and it's good to sit down in this forum with Mike and Kelly as well. So to give everyone an idea of where the Virginia State Police is involved in the gaming space. So I'm a major in our Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The state police is separated into 3 bureaus. Most commonly, everyone's probably used to seeing troopers on the side of the road. That's our Bureau of Field Operations. Then we have the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which oversees all the criminal investigations conducted by our personnel and the task force personnel assigned to the task forces we oversee across the Commonwealth. And then we have a 3rd bureau, which is our Bureau of Administrative and Support Services, that conducts all the behind the scenes functions of the state police, the communications functions, the procurement, things like that. And so as a major and a deputy director in our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, I and my counterpart, as well as our boss, Colonel Lyon, who's sitting here with me as well, oversee those investigations across the state. And our involvement in the gaming space over time has been as the complaints of criminal activity arise, whether it's through our partners, for instance, the lottery or VDAX, or other state agencies as well, or local and federal law enforcement agencies arise, we conduct investigations as they occur. Most often those have taken place when in the bingo halls and some of those kinds of venues, when there are allegations that someone is taking money or not, divvying out the prizes as appropriate. With the passage of the budget and during the 2022 session, the General Assembly, in its budget language, established within the state police the Office of the Gaming Enforcement Coordinator. And so, and also changed a little bit of the language in how we work with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And so with that change in the budget language, it reinforces our relationship with VDAX, which is strong anyway. And certainly we have a strong relationship with the lottery as well, but also creates that new office. And where that stands now is there's a little bit of process, as you might imagine, in the state government. So we have advertised for that person to have a position within our office and the BCI director's office. And that should be in place probably within a month or so. Right now, we're in the process of establishing a gaming tip line where the public can report complaints about gaming or betting, and they would go directly to that new coordinator to work with our partners, be it the lottery or VDAX or the other local or state or federal agencies involved in the gaming space, and conduct those investigations. So again, thank you again for the opportunity, and look forward to any questions anyone has.
Again, if anybody has any questions now, they can feel free to unmute themselves or type them in the Q&A or the chat. And if not, we'll move on to Michael and with VDAX, who can talk about what's going on in charitable gaming world, and then we can have time for questions as well after. Okay, Michael. And Michael, if you have anything you want to share, you should be able to share. There you go. Okay.
Again, I'm Benefino with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. I'm the program manager.
You're breaking up at the moment. I don't know if the speaker is away from you.
Can you hear me now, Ann? Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you now.
I'm Benefino with the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the Office of Charitable Regulatory Program, which is tasked with tests. So just to kind of rehash and remind everybody, gambling is illegal in Virginia, except for a few exceptions: casinos, charitable gaming, lottery, pure mutual wagering. Don't see.
Michael?
Yeah.
You're still breaking up a lot. I don't know if it's just me, if it's happening to others. Please. Okay, someone else said the same thing. So
Okay.
I don't know if there's something with the microphone or.
It's probably. All right, well, we'll try the best that we can.
Okay.
It may be a network issue, which obviously. So obviously, contests are not considered in the code. Tests operators is a game of skill, not actual gambling. Of in the fantasy contest, sports arena, or actually also in. But specifically, charitable gaming covers specific games, bingo, which is both electronic and paper format. Electronic gaming, as what we commonly refer to electronic tab device. And seal card.
Michael, can you hear
Yep.
me? Sorry. I'm just wondering, would you mind trying to maybe get off Zoom and then get back on
Yep.
Zoom? See if that might make a difference.
All right.
Okay, sorry.
Nope.
Okay, so while we wait to see if that helps to improve Mr. Menefee's audio. There was a question that came in for Kelly. It's in the Q&A and it says, no, maybe it was in the chat. Where was that?
Yeah, I think Ms. Hughes had asked about the names of the 3 oversight agencies.
Yes.
So there's Virginia Lottery, the Racing Commission, and the Michael's group, the Office of Charitable Gaming and Regulatory Affairs. I can't remember their exact title, something along those lines.
Okay.
I think there was also a question about the status of the skill games and convenience stores that I'm happy to take a stab at.
Great.
Yeah, so they are in the middle of a lawsuit that will be heard in fall, October, I think, or November. And just a reminder, the state, the General Assembly and the governor banned them and then said, no, we'll let them operate for a year during COVID, but then the ban will take effect. There was a lawsuit that December, the judge said, we're going to put an injunction on the ban, which means that the skill machines can operate until the court determines the constitutionality of the ban. So we are in the middle of that right now. There are machines out there and operating. There's no regulatory oversight. The court will hear the case this fall.
Thank you. Perfect. And it looks like Michael's back. And I don't know if you can share, or maybe I need to give you, let's see if I need to make you a co-host again. So hopefully you can share your screen.
And can you hear me?
Oh, much better.
All right. I guess I got a bad connection somewhere. All right. Round 2. Do you want me to go back up top again, Ann?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll cut it out of the record, the other stuff out of the recording.
Okay. All right, just to kind of refresh everybody, gambling is illegal in the Commonwealth of Virginia under 18.2-325 of the code. There's only a few exceptions to the prohibition against gambling. The casinos, charitable gaming, lottery, pari-mutuel wagering, which also includes the historical racing machines and sports wagering. As I mentioned earlier, fantasy contests is not included in this because per the code, it's not considered gambling, but rather a game of skill, even though but a lot of our fantasy contest operators are actually in the sports wagering arena as well. So just kind of refresh everyone's mind. So specifically getting down to charitable gaming consists of bingo, which we both have both paper and electronic bingo devices. We have what's called electronic pull tab devices on the legislation, which I'm going to discuss a little bit more in this presentation. It is now being referred to electronic gaming. Which is going to be a bit of a shift for us, as well as paper instant bingos. The best way I could describe for those that are not familiar with instant bingo pull tabs or even seal cards, it's almost like a lottery ticket, but instead of taking a quarter and scratching off the film, you pop open perforated edges to reveal whether you're a winner or not. Raffles, which everyone's familiar with, and the latest addition is Texas Hold'em poker tournaments. So that encompasses charitable gaming in Virginia, and those activities are conducted by charities as a form of fundraising to help them support their missions in the community. Now, I'll tell you, we didn't have a lot going on during this legislative session. I jokingly say that it was a very busy legislative session for us. We had 16 bills that we had to deal with. Most of them passed, about 11 of the 16 passed. But I'm just going to focus on the primary ones for our topic today. But it did a wide variety of operational issues, as well as some of the stuff that just directly impacts the industry in itself. But the biggest bill that we're going to focus on is specifically regarding electronic pull tab devices. For those that don't remember my discussion last year on electronic pull tab devices, this is what an electronic pull tab device looks like. Yeah, it kind of looks like a slot machine, but it's not a slot machine with respect to it all. But what it does, it takes a paper version of a pull tab, seal card, or instant bingo and puts it into electronic format at the end of the day. But just looking at the device itself without getting into the guts of the device, surely it looks like something other than an electronic pull tab device. But this is what it looks like. Now, specifically the games, you'll see here, the bottom part of the screen is where it would normally be covered, and then it requires the player to interact with the device to reveal whether or not they have winning symbols. And clearly the device will indicate whether or not you won, and you can go ahead and hit play again, which is the bottom right-hand corner of this image, and purchase and play again. Now, just to kind of let you know that pull tabs have been growing in size over the years, and these are gross receipts, what's been reported to us by the manufacturers. We started this back in November of 2012. And you see when it first started and entered into the marketplace in the Commonwealth, it's about 107 million. And as of last year, it was 1.3 billion just on gross receipts alone. So it is a significant portion of what we do, and as well as tracking. And obviously after review, the General Assembly decided to give us regulatory control back over the private social quarters, which is where a lot of these devices were in. So last year, in Senate Bill 1127, which is Chapter 520 of the Acts Assembly of last year, they placed the private social quarters where all these devices, for the most part, were operating, and we hadn't been in that space for over 20 years. So now we're getting back familiar with private social quarters and interacting with organizations we've had not interacted with for 20 years. But that was only the beginning of the changes regarding electronic pull tab devices. This year alone, the significant bill that we're navigating through right now is House Bill 763 and Senate Bill 403. It made some significant changes to our law. In some respects, it's a very complicated piece of legislation for us. But it defined the new term for us for electronic gaming or electronic games to mean instant bingo, seal cards, or pull tabs conducted primarily by the use of electronic devices. Now, again, we've had electronic pull tab devices since November of 2012, but now this is explicitly calling those devices electronic gaming in lieu of what we normally had called it electronic pull tab devices. But needless to say, we're going to be making those adjustments with respects to it all. But as of July 1 of this year, those devices are no longer allowed to be part of a bingo session. So that is a significant change. That wasn't really the bulk of the device placement we had in Virginia. It represented about 5% of the total number of devices. We have roughly about 4,000 devices in Virginia just on electronic pull tab devices alone. But those are no longer allowed to be in a bingo session. And then as of, again, July 1 of this year, those devices are actually limited to the premises of a social quarter. So naturally, I'm sure you're asking, what is a social organization? Well, a social organization is defined by this bill to be an accredited public institution of higher education or other post-secondary school licensed by the Board of Education or SHEV and designated as a 501c3. So private colleges like Virginia Union University, some of the other colleges that meet this criteria, is considered by statute a social organization. And then traditionally, fraternal organizations have been designated by the IRS as a 501c8 or even a 501c10. And then veteran organizations that have been designated a 501c19, such as the American Legion or the VFW. So that's going to come to play when I get into this next slide. As of July 1 of this year, electronic pull tab devices, again, are not allowed in bingo games anymore, bingo sessions anymore, but they can only be played on the premises of a social organization. So they're limited to a public institution of higher education or post-secondary school, limited to fraternal organization or veteran organization. Now, the pull tab devices are limited to the private social quarters of a social organization. Now, in those cases, they're limited to members and their guests, which is what we've always been allowed. The significant change to this bill is now these devices are allowed elsewhere on the premises of a social organization by the organization itself. So they can't be in a bingo game anymore, which is significant for us because prior to these changes, you can only have the pull tab devices as part of the private social quarters or part of the bingo game. This is because of this bill. It's decoupling the electronic pull tab devices from both a bingo and from a private social quarters. So this is now going to allow the electronic pull tab devices to be open to the public outside of the bingo game and outside of a private social quarter. So if a veteran organization like the American Legion wanted to move some of those devices into a public space of their building and make them available to the public, they can do so under this bill. The other thing that this bill also allows them, the social organization, to do is to rent their public space out to another organization that would not normally be allowed to have the devices on their own premises. So, for an example, if you end up having I'll just pick American Red Cross, even though they're not permitted by us, but American Red Cross, which is not considered a social organization. And so if they wanted to conduct electronic pull tab devices or electronic gaming, then they could go to a VFW or American Legion post, rent their public space, not their private social quarters, but their public space, and then run these devices. So that is a significant change for us. And then what the bill further does is limits the number of devices on the premises to 18. Now, prior to all this, the law capped the number of devices in the private social quarter at 18. What this does, it keeps it at 18, but it expands the limitations to the entire facility. So what that means in a very practical standpoint is if you have 9 devices in the private social quarters of a social organizations, then you could have 9 devices in the public room that could be either used by the social organization itself or by a non-social organization. But the entire facility is capped at 18 devices. What the bill also does is prohibit advertisements to the public to play the electronic pull tab devices by any organization. That prohibition was already in place when it came to the pull tab devices in the private social quarters. But now that they're allowing the pull tab devices to be in a public room of a social organization, that prohibition the prohibition on advertisement gets expanded. It also requires, which is interesting, requires members of the social organization to pay the expenses of their guests who play the devices in the private social quarters. So prior to this change, if I had brought in a guest and I was a member of the social organization, I brought in a guest, then that guest could obviously use their own money to play the electronic pull tab devices and etc. But now under the requirements of the statute and of this bill, I would have to pay the expense of my guests to play those devices. The other part of this, when it comes to the devices in the public room of a social organization, there is no restrictions on the frequency or the time constraints of the devices. So essentially, those public spaces could be open 12 hours, 14 hours, 20 hours a day. and 7 days a week. There is no limitations to that in the code. So we'll see how the market reacts once that becomes available. There's no one permitted at this point to do that quite yet, because we are in the process of developing regulations. And I've spent my last few months of existence developing regulations governing all this, and try to get these the regulatory structure be able to administer this accordingly. Now, the bill also statutorily requires us to put decals on the devices. We were already required regulatory-wise to do that. This is now making it a statutory requirement to tag the devices. So, and part of that too was to differentiate, even though we know what a pull tab device is, because you have other electronic devices out in the public, it's very difficult for people to differentiate between what is electronic pull tab and what may be another type of device out there. So these are what our stickers look like. They're actually self-destructive decals, so that if someone attempts to remove it, it will self-destruct to prevent someone trying to peel them off and sticking them onto a device that is clearly not an electronic pull tab device. But these are what our decals look like. The other thing that this bill does was increase the eligibility to play the electronic pull tab devices from 18 to 21. It also allows the devices, these electronic pull tab devices, to utilize multiple video monitors or touch screens. Prior to all this, that the regulations restricted to one touch screen or one video monitor per device. Now the law allows to have multiple screens. So what you'll probably end up seeing is that instead of a gigantic screen kind of on its side to make it long-wise, you'll probably end up seeing two screens at this point. Now, what the code does prohibit is, or requires, is that those devices can only be played by one player at a time. That was to address concerns with legislators that somehow that someone would come up with a device that could have 3 or 4 screens on them, and then have multiple players playing those devices, and then the question is how does that play into the 18 device limitation as well? So again, it just limits the play of those devices to one player at a time with the multiple screens. This is new for us as well. This was a bit of a what I will call a loophole in the law, and has been for some time. They actually closed it up with this bill, where it actually explicitly prohibits any organization to extend a line of credit or any form of credit or any other electronic fund transfer other than a debit card to play the devices. Prior to this bill, there was no restriction whatsoever. Now, did that happen? Not to our knowledge it ever happened, but there was already a prohibition, extending lines of credits and et cetera for bingo. But naturally, that this should be in place to deal with this type of device. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on this device, on this bill, is that it did give VDACs the ability to assess civil penalties for violations of not less than $25,000 and not more than $50,000 per incident. Prior to all that, we did not have that authority whatsoever. The only way that we could obtain compliance was either revoke or suspend the permit, or if it was a criminal matter, to turn that over to the Commonwealth's attorney for them to decide whether to prosecute criminally or not. So this is an additional tool to our arsenal to obtain compliance with the gambling laws of, for charitable gaming when it comes to all that. So that is, again, we had a lot of bills in the General Assembly, but that was probably the basis of you know, for this audience, what electronic, you know, more so the electronic pull tab devices. Okay. Some of the other things that we're working on is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on regulations to implement both House Bill 763 and Senate Bill 394 when it comes to electronic pull tab devices. There's a lot of requirements in there that we have to develop regulations for. And then obviously Texas Hold'em poker tournaments, we're actually working on those now. And I'm not by any shape of the imagination an expert on Texas Hold'em, but I'm apparently becoming one really quickly as we're developing these regulations alone. So that is an interesting opportunity for us. And then the other thing is significant for us, even though this was not a legislative change for us, But last year, in the budget, the General Assembly limited our authority to approve new devices when it comes to electronic pull tab devices, both hardware and software. We actually have to explicitly approve both the hardware and the software prior to deployment of those devices in the marketplace. So because of the changes or the pending changes that were contemplated by the General Assembly, they restricted our ability to approve those hardware and software. So we had a moratorium in place for over a year. Now that moratorium has been lifted effective July 1. And so we've been now inundated with all sorts of requests for hardware upgrades as well as software upgrades. So we're already going to be seeing new devices, new cabinets coming out in the field and so forth. So a lot of changes for us right now. And we have approximately about 425 organizations are permitted to conduct some form of charitable gaming in Virginia alone. And that's all I have for now.
Well, that's quite a bit. We do have a couple questions that have popped up. One was, do you know why pull tab, the changes in the pull tab e-game laws, that why they took them out of bingo halls, why it was placed in a bill? Was there something that was happening in the bingo places?
I don't think it was specifically anything that was happening in the bingo sessions alone. They only represented about 5% of what the total number of devices are in Virginia alone. So that was just a policy decision the General Assembly made.
And then another question was, is there any requirement to include responsible gaming and helpline messaging on the machine so that the people, those electronic pull tab machines, so that people playing them would clearly see, not teeny tiny like what's in Rosie's messages for how to play safely, responsibly, and the helpline?
There is not an explicit requirement on the device itself when it comes to on-screen information. We do require all the locations that we permitted that they have to provide on a poster in the facility where the device is located for gamblers anonymous or problem gambling, for contact information. And when our field inspectors go out and inspect these locations, whether it's bingo, these private social quarters, even in the new venues that is going to be opening up here shortly, they're all going to be required to have that poster and have it posted. And we are looking for it to make sure it is posted.
Since you're working on the new rules around all that, can you see about trying to include that they also include things like responsible gaming and prevention messaging that, gives people tips how to do it safely?
Yeah, certainly we can take that into consideration, and we can get with you too to get a little more specifics on what specific language or that we could provide on that. But we certainly will take that under advisement.
And there is another message or another question that says, what is the prevalence of electronic games in Virginia Institutes of Higher Education? And what was the rationale related to allowing institutions of higher education to be allowed to have them when that is such a high-risk population for gambling and gaming addiction?
That was a policy decision. Obviously, the General Assembly felt that was something that they had to include. So.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the legislators, I guess, that came.
Yeah,
up with that.
and yeah, that was a decision they made.
Okay. Want to see if other people have questions. I keep getting that there's a question. Okay. Oh, I guess that one was answered. There was a thing from Virginia Horse Racing that they weren't able to be on this call and they asked to share. And it says, and so don't ask me any questions on it. Maybe somebody else can answer if you have a question. It's, as of July 1, 2022, no patrons under the age of 21 will be allowed to enter any Rosie's facility. IDs will be scanned as always at the entrance by uniformed security guards to ensure compliance. The only exception to this will be on the 27 days of live horse racing at Colonial Downs. On these days, uniformed security guards will check IDs at the entrances to the sectioned off areas in which wagering on HHR takes place at the racetrack. This is the same procedure that was used on live racing days in the past when the age limit to play historical horse racing was 18. The VRC is satisfied that those procedures will ensure compliance with the new age restriction for HHR wagering. So I'm wondering if folks have any questions. They can come off mute. They can put them in the Q&A. So here's one for all three. Are the three organizations or agencies that are on this, are they working together to put any of this, these new laws and rules in place? Anybody can answer.
I'll take first stab. Just that, we kind of stick to our mission and our responsibilities. So I know Michael has a lot on his plate, but that is, not under lottery's purview. So we're just focused on the things that we have. Like Richard said, we work with the state police now on background investigations and the like, but our stuff related to casino sports betting and the JLARC study has us focused on what we do.
Yeah, and in terms of charitable gaming, I mean, we've clearly have worked with state police in the past, and we've continued to work with state police. Obviously, they're taking on a much slightly different role with their new office, which we've already have continued dialogue with them, and we'll continue to do so. But we're excited about state police's involvement on that arena as well.
I will say the one area that Mike and I work in, we have together is there's the voluntary exclusion list that we kind of maintain. So when sports betting casinos came, there's now a list that people can put themselves on to exclude from gaming and advertisements. We offer different time limits. So somebody could exclude themselves for 2, 5, a lifetime, but when they put themselves on that list, whether they have a problem or a potential problem with any one type of gambling, they're excluded from all types. So we have a voluntary exclusion list that we push out to Charitable Gaming and HHR to make sure that their regulated entities are not targeting or allowing those to play.
Just following up on that exclusion, if if this is not in your purview, just let me know. I know that I had heard that some casinos in other states who, obviously they have them all over the place. They actually have like their own exclusion list that if someone's excluded in one state, it goes across. Does our exclusion list connect in with their exclusion list? Oh, muted.
That's a great question. I'm not sure that their in-house exclusion list would talk to ours. Bristol just opened. I think we're still kind of figuring out some of those procedures, but that's a good question. I'm happy to follow up on.
And I had an interesting question or conversation with Major Boyd the other day, and we were talking about the age of people being able to enter a casino. And I don't know if Major Boyd or Kelly, if either one of you want to answer that question, is how old you have to be to enter a casino and then play
Yeah, that
in
was a good
casino?
poll question. So you can be any age to enter a casino, but to get on the gaming floor, you have to be 21.
Yeah, that was a little trick question.
I know, I saw that. That was clever. Also, there was the other poll question: how old do you have to play lottery? 18.
And which is, go ahead.
And just for bingo, as long as you're accompanied by a parent or legal guardian, you can play bingo.
You can play bingo.
You can play bingo as
any
long as you're
age.
accompanied. Yep.
I thought that changed for some reason. Okay,
No.
guess not.
No.
Okay. So that's it's interesting. I was in a one of the truck stops a few weeks ago, and I saw some child asking his parent or guardian or whomever it was to buy him a lottery ticket from the machine, and I just wanted to say for him to play. And I'm like, I wanted to say, you're not allowed to do that. But I didn't. I didn't
make
want
sure we train our retailers to look for that kind of stuff. So that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, well, it was like it's one of those big truck stops. So they're kind of, it was, I don't know if it was in the eye of the person, the clerk or not, but it was there it was like one of those TNA, isn't that what it's called? One of those big ones. So there's a couple more questions. Can you explain the social organization's payment for people utilizing pull tab gaming?
I'm going to interpret this question slightly, and I think this question relates to a member paying a guest or having to pay a guest to play those devices, or their expenses for playing those devices. If I'm understanding that question to be that.
I think
If
that's probably what it is.
Okay, so what that is, okay, he says yes. All right. So what that is, because prior to all that, in rare occasions did we see the fact that where folks were trying to, say, hey, if Ann and I were going into a private social quarters and Anna was my guest, I may not know Ann, right? She's my guest, but I don't know Ann. And that is not what the intent was. As far as we're concerned, that was a violation. So this is putting an additional requirement that if you're my guest, then guess what? You're on the hook of paying that. And that is also in line with the IRS requirements. If you really dig down deep into the IRS requirements, when it comes to private social quarters and the rules governing such quarters, is that the member is supposed to be paying the guest's expenses for being in that space, whether it's food, whether it's drinks, and in this case, required by statute for playing the electronic pull tab devices. So I think it was a combination of both the IRS requirements and then number two, to make sure that if you're my guest, then you're truly my guest. So I think it's going to, cut down on some of that abuse that we saw a little bit. It wasn't rampant, it was in the rare occasions.
So we have another question, and I'm assuming this could be for anyone. Can you share more about the responsible gambling techniques that you all use or your operators use?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I have to brag on my team, who I think is listening. John Haggerty and Jennifer Mullen from Virginia Lottery are two of the best team members we have at Lottery, and they are our people, our responsible gaming advocates, kind of leading the agency in this space. So law requires that on every lottery ticket, we publish the helpline. We have a lot of rules and regulations for the entities that we regulate, the sports betting operators and casinos, that they have to have the helpline, they have to have the number available. We have an excellent relationship with the Virginia Council on Problem Gambling. So we do a handful of things. We publish pamphlets and brochures in English and in Spanish. We have an entire month dedicated to problem gambling awareness. But I will say that our biggest piece of this is we're about awareness. We want to make sure people know that the council exists, that the hotline exists, but we leave it to people like, Ann and Carolyn Hawley on the council to really handle the treatment and the provider side of things. We just make the number available for people to know that resources are there.
And Michael, did you have anything you wanted to add, or are you
No, I mean, again, we provide the posters to folks to make sure that information is readily available. We make sure that it is posted. It's posted in a conspicuous place, so it's not attached to a door of a closet that no one gets to see. So we make sure that those are posted, and make sure that it's up to date and bring it to people's attention as well. Dealing with charities is a little bit different, but we do work with them and make sure that they're aware of it. Beyond that, we obviously don't venture into.
So another question would be, I guess, for Major Boyd, is there anything that you might want to see, or some things that you think that any of the CSBs may be able to do to help in the process, or once the tip line is out, if there's anything you think might be useful?
Yes, ma'am. And again, we're excited to get, into the space that a little further than we already have been in the past. And like we talked about earlier with Kelly's folks and Mike's folks and everyone else. So one of the things that I think you and I talked about the other day is the tip line should be up and running, we hope, in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, there's a process to it, and it's not even a government process. It's really just it's a Verizon process. They take a while to get us phone lines. So I know they're working through that right now, and it just takes some time. So one of the critical functions of CSB and for us related to the tip line is getting the word out, right? So there's we don't know if there are issues related to gaming unless we hear about them from the folks that are seeing these things. We're excited to have the coordinator. Unfortunately, that's only one person though. So one person is tough to get across the Commonwealth, and even to meet on a incredibly frequent basis. They can't be meeting with everybody and seeing everything. So it's important for the public to get that information to us so we can address it as it needs to be addressed and engage Kelly's folks and Mike's folks, and make sure the things are done correctly and the spaces are, right.
Please. Not sure what this is. Frank, you're welcome to take yourself off mute if you'd like. It says, please over the G on prevention. So I'm not sure what that one means. So if anybody else has any questions, our last 5 minutes. And it looks like there aren't any coming in. Oh, it says please overlook the G. Oh, okay, on prevention in the statement above. Okay, that is fine, we'll do. I want to thank everybody for, Kelly and Richard and Michael for presenting and sharing the information on the laws. And if folks have other questions. Oh, sorry, one last question. Hillary Pyland asks, what types of things should be reported to the tip line? Do you know what that would be yet, Major Boyd? Or
at this point, we're still in the process of building it out. So I would say complaints about gaming activity is, leave it very, very vague. And ideally, if someone wants to remain, if someone wants to remain anonymous, that's okay. But as we delve further into the space, I think it'll be helpful for the Office of the Gaming Enforcement Coordinator to have greater engagement with those folks as well. So hopefully people will leave phone numbers or email addresses or some kind of contact information so we can get back in touch with them.
thank you. Okay, so we'll finish this up. As far as the prevention awareness program for gaming and gambling that Frank asked, the Office of Behavioral Health Wellness has a media campaign that they're doing on wellness overall, and we are going to include financial wellness, which will be part of the gaming and gambling component. And hopefully within the next two 2 to 5 months, we'll have something that can go out from the state. But more will come on that because we'll be also contacting people for input, et cetera, into that messaging. So if nobody else has anything, I do want to thank again Virginia Lottery, Virginia State Police, and VDAX for participating, sharing their expertise on this with us, and hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thanks.